The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Vedanta in all its phases, addressed by Swami Vivekananda at Calcutta, Part 4. This we ought to remember always, but unfortunately for India at the present time, we have forgotten it. A petty village custom seems now the real authority and not the teaching of the Upanishads. A petty idea current in the wayside in Bengal seems to have the authority of the Vedas and even something better. And that word orthodox, how wonderful its influence. To the villager, the following of every little bit of the Karam Kand is the very height of orthodoxy. And one who does not do it is told, go away, you are no more a Hindu. So there are more, unfortunately, in my motherland, persons who will take up one of these tantras and say that the practice of this tantra is to be obeyed. He who does not do so is no more orthodox in his views. Therefore, it is better for us to remember that in the Upanishads is the primary authority. Even the Griha and the Sautra Sutras are subordinate to the authority of the Vedas. They are the words of the Rishis, our forefathers. And you have to believe them if you want to become a Hindu. You may even believe the most peculiar ideas about the Godhead, but if you deny the authority of the Vedas, you are a Nastika. Therein lies the difference between the scriptures of the Christians or the Buddhists and ours. Theirs are all Puranas and not scriptures, because they describe the history of the deluge and the history of kings and reigning families and record the lives of great men and so on. This is the work of the Puranas, and so far as they agree with the Vedas, they are good. So far as the Bible and the scriptures of other nations agree with the Vedas, they are perfectly good. But when they do not agree, they are no more to be accepted. So also with the Quran. There are many moral teachings in these, and so far as they agree with the Vedas, they have the authority of the Puranas, but no more. The idea is that the Vedas were never written. The idea is they never came into existence. I was told once by a Christian missionary that their scriptures have a historical character and therefore are true. To which I replied, mine have no historical character and therefore they are true. Yours being historical, they were evidently made by some man the other day. Yours are man-made and mine are not. Their non-historicity is in their favor. Such is the relation of the Vedas with all the other scriptures of the present day. We come now to the teachings of the Upanishads. Various texts are there. Some are perfectly dualistic, while others are monoistic. But there are certain doctrines which are agreed to by all the different sects of India. First, there is the doctrine of samsara, or reincarnation of the soul. Secondly, they all agree in their psychology. First, there is a body. Behind that, what they call the Suksham Sharira, the mind, and behind that even is the Jiva. That is the great difference between Western and Indian psychology. In the Western psychology, the mind is the soul. Here it is not. The Antakarna, the internal instrument as the mind is called, is only an instrument in the hands of that Jiva, through which the Jiva works on the body or on the external world. Here they all agree, and they are all agree that this Jiva or Atman, Jivatman as it is called by various sects, is eternal, without beginning. and that is going from birth to birth until it gets a final release. They all agree in this, and they are also in agreement in one another most vital point, which alone marks characteristically, most prominently, most vitally, the difference between the Indian and the Western mind. And it is this, that everything is in the soul. There is no inspiration, but properly speaking, expiration. All powers and all purity and all greatness, everything is in the soul. The yogi would tell you that the siddhis, anima, the ghima, and so on, that he wants to attain to are not to be attained in the proper sense of the word, but are already there in the soul. The work is to make them manifest. Patanjali, for instance, would tell you that even in the lowest worm that crawls under your feet, all the eightfold yogi's powers are already existing. The difference has been made by the body. As soon as it gets a better body, the powers will become manifest. But they are there. Good and bad deeds are not the direct causes in the transformations of nature, but they act as breakers of obstacles to the evolutions of nature. As a farmer breaks the obstacles to the course of water, which then runs down by its own nature, here Patanjali gives the celebrated example of the cultivator bringing water into his own field from a huge tank somewhere. The tank is already filled and the water would flood his land in a moment. But only there is a mud wall between the tank and the field. As soon as the barrier is broken, in rushes the water out of its own power and force. This mass of power and purity and perfection is in the soul already. The only difference is the avarna, the veil that has been cast over it. Once the veil is removed, the soul attains to purity and its powers become manifest. This you ought to remember is the great difference between Eastern and Western thought. Hence you find people are teaching such awful doctrines as that we are all born sinners. And because we do not believe in such awful doctrines, we are all born wicked. They never stop to think that if we are by our own very nature wicked, we can never change to be good. For how can nature change? If it changes, it contradicts itself. It is not nature. We ought to remember this. Here, the dualists agree, and the Advaitists and all others in India agree.